It was after dinner and I was reading the Boston Globe and I saw an ad for the Nantucket School of Needlery in the paper. It talked about the school and the fact that it had an extension program. They called it an extension class. So thought it would be fun to learn something about stitching. The first thing that I got, it was like Christmas. It was wonderful. It was this beautiful, heavy cardboard box that was covered with some sort of material that looked like, but I'm sure it wasn't, leather. And it had a snap front, and the click just sounded wonderful. When you opened it, it went, and then this wonderful thing would open. There were black and white photographs, close-up, of fabric that had been stitched upon. In the beginning, you were to repeat those stitches, and you learned about who used them and what they used them for. Then you would send it in, but the important part of that whole experience was the fact that you connected it with who was doing it and when. So the history part, that was the part that changed my life.
Welcome to the Nantucket Gam, a podcast by the Nantucket Historical Association. I'm Thomas Parrish.
I'm Annalie Gilbert-Keith.
And I'm Adam DeLogue.
The story we opened with today is part of an oral history taken by Susan Boardman, who was a student at the Nantucket School of Needlery, and who would go on to become a well-known needlework artist on Nantucket. So, to dive in, Annalie, can you explain what exactly is needlework, or needlery?
Well, needlery is really another word for needlework. So embroidery, and you can get into different specifics of types of needlework, cross stitch, crewel, which essentially refer to the different stitches and materials that would be used.
So let's start at the beginning. How did the School of Needlery come to be?
That is sort of a long story, but it really starts with the Jared Coffin House restoration in 1962.
This is the hotel on Broad Street?
Yep, okay. Exactly. In the 1960s, the Nantucket Historical Trust and the Beinecke's, Walter and Mary Ann, purchased the Jared Coffin House. The Jared Coffin House is a hotel right in the middle of downtown Nantucket. It has been a hotel under various names for well over 100 years, notably the Ocean House. But the Jared Coffin House, as we all know it today, traces back directly to this restoration that was spearheaded after the purchase of the hotel by the Beinecke's and the Historical Trust. And one of the rooms that they designed in the Jared Coffin House was known as the embroidery room. And Mary Ann Beinecke, she put out a call for women to help with the needlework, to have it all hand done in the embroidery room.
So when you say embroidery room, is it a room for embroidery, or is it a room decorated with embroidery?
A room decorated with embroidery. Okay. And so 13 or 14 women, that number changes, but it's always 13 or 14. They volunteered and they worked together to embroider 4 pairs of curtains, a double bedspread, and all of the valances, the little curtains at the tops of the windows in the embroidery room. That project is really what inspired the creation of both Nantucket looms and then a group that became known as the Nantucket Needlewomen. The Nantucket Needlewomen were a group of women who already practiced needlework that came together in a more official social and business capacity, emphasis on the business more than the social. And the number of needlewomen grew quite a lot over the years as they worked together and taught more people. But initially, it was this same small group of women that had created the embroidered pieces in the Jared Coffin House. They were also sometimes referred to as the crewel ladies. That's Crewel, which is a kind of thread. But I think it's kind of funny that that was how they were referred to.
I thought it was a type of donut.
I think like a bunch of mean ladies, but
Yep. So the crewel ladies were the needlewomen.
So there's one project at the Jared Coffin House to restore it, branched into several different groups of needle workers on island. The looms, the crewel women.
The looms are not needleworkers.
Okay.
They're making fabric.
Okay.
Are the needleworkers not making fabric?
No, they're decorating fabric.
Okay.
That's where the distinctions in the scope of fiber and textile arts start to come in. Weaving, needlework, crochet, knitting, those are all different arts. And so needlework is specifically embroidery.
So let's back up a little bit. There's a long tradition of needlework and embroidery in history. Why in the 1960s do we see the embroidery room pop up at the Jared Coffin House and these groups of women come together to start producing embroidery in more of a commercial sense?
I think part of what made the needlery a successful business is that it came in and was founded at the right moment. There were two broader trends, one quite local and one more nationwide, that supported the success of the needlery. The first is the Nantucket Historical Trust and Walter Beinecke, who had an aim to create this really historic Nantucket, almost colonial Williamsburg type place. And then the second movement being the nationwide craft revival, which you see in a return to handcraft through textiles like weaving and needlework, but also with architecture and furniture building and home design and things like that. And so these two movements together really helped the needlery find success on Nantucket. And the Beineckes, specifically Walter Beinecke, had this vision to create a sort of old-timey feel using the craft revival movement that had momentum.
Sounds like a potentially divisive figure.
Yes, very much so. And very involved in this whole endeavor with the Nantucket Needlewomen, the School of Needlery, because they were sponsored by the Nantucket Historical Trust.
So Walter Beinecke's Historical Trust is sponsoring his wife's business of Marianne Beinecke's needlework. Am I understanding that correctly?
Kind of. Marianne Beinecke initiated the start of the Nantucket Needlewomen, but she wasn't necessarily like the leader. It was really a collective.
Okay.
So after this project to create the embroidery room at the Jared Coffin House, she connects these women as the Nantucket Needlewomen, gets the sponsorship from the Nantucket Historical Trust, which was in the building that Ralph Lauren is in today. And that's where the Nantucket Needlewomen were based. And so they start taking commissions, they start taking courses and bringing more highly acclaimed needlework artists to Nantucket to teach them, from Sweden, from the UK, from mainland USA, all coming over to really focus in on this craft.
And is this supposed to be, in the minds of the people who are creating this, is this supposed to be like a driver of business? Is this like a real commercial move to create this needlery location on Nantucket at this time?
In part, yes. I think that mindset comes in a little bit later. At first, there's really a push to revive needlework on Nantucket, to really just establish that community. And really early on, they're also focused on creating the correct atmosphere for embroidery. And they held some of the early classes at the Hadwin House, which is now an NHA, Nantucket Historical Association property.
Which is different than the Historical Trust.
Yes, yes, thank you. Because, quote, "It is an accepted fact that embroidery classes should be held in a charming, genteel atmosphere with a lot of good natural daylight." That's a quote from the Inquirer and Mirror. They're really focusing on creating this proper needlework circle.
And how do they do that? What are the steps they take to create that environment?
So they start bringing women from all over the world to teach courses to the Nantucket Needlewomen and improve their skill set within embroidery, but also bringing people like Mildred Davis, who is based in the Boston area, to help them learn how to teach needlework rather than just doing needlework. So they're not only improving their skill set, but they're also improving the ways that they can impart their knowledge to beginner needleworkers.
So not only keep this craft alive on Nantucket, but also propagate it.
Exactly. They also start taking commission work, and so people could reach out to them for specific pieces for their home. And then also out of the Nantucket Historical Trust building, they start a small store. And so then not only are they selling commission work, they're also beginning this commercial endeavor, which would later move to a number of different locations outside the Historical Trust. But already in the first few years of this group existing, they already have their educational branch, their commercial branch, their commissions. They're already doing a lot of different things.
And are those still under the same organizational umbrella?
Yeah, so until 1966, all of these different branches of the Nantucket Needlery are still under the Nantucket Historical Trust. At that point, you see one of the clearest moments of change in this business structure. And before I really get into that, I just want to point out that there's never a very clear delineation of all of these different brand names and subsects of the Nantucket Needlery, trying to really put together a storyline of this history has been a huge puzzle for me. And I'm sure that comes across as we're talking about it, that there is some murkiness that can be really frustrating. But 1966, there is a very clear and documented change when the Nantucket Needlery leaves their sponsorship from the Historical Trust. At that point, they're purchased by 4 people, Marianne and Walter Beinecke, and Dee Dee and Leslie Tillett. And Dee Dee and Leslie Tillett also owned the cloth company, the Nantucket looms, and the print barn.
Sort of a textile monopoly.
A little bit, yeah. They owned quite a few businesses in the textile world on Nantucket, but they were also not the only ones on Nantucket with textile-based businesses. You also have Erica Wilson and the Craft Center, which was owned by Elizabeth Gilbert. But with the needlery, this change ultimately means that the women are able to focus on teaching and practicing needlework, while the owners are doing the business administration piece. Leslie Tillett said, "The needlewomen have expressed the desire to be free to devote their time and efforts to the execution of commissioned work and to professional teaching without the burdensome problems of business administration, sales promotion, and other details connected with a growing business."
I would love to be liberated of my problems of business administration.
So really the Nantucket Needlery is the commercial endeavor. They're selling embroidered goods. They're taking the commissions for the Nantucket Needlewomen. They're hosting courses still. But then a year later in 1967, the Nantucket School of Needlery opens, and that is separate. So Nantucket Needlery was on Straight Wharf, sort of by the gazebo, and the Nantucket School of Needlery was at number 2 India Street, so kitty corner to the Athenaeum.
In that quote you just read by Leslie Tillett, the needlewomen have expressed the desire to be free to devote their time and effort, that quote, that there's a real passion for the art form, but maybe less of a passion for the business side of it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It always turns out well.
Well, that's what I'm curious
when it
about.
comes to making money, because having a business.
But also being passionate is like the most important thing to keep something afloat, right? So in this restructuring where the Beineckes take more of a leadership role with the Tillets, they're taking on the business side of it so that the women who are doing the craft can be more focused on the craft.
Exactly.
Okay, so we see the School of Needlery arrive on the scene in 1967. But are the Nantucket needlewomen who we've been following, are they the same ones at the Nantucket School of Needlery doing the teaching?
Some of them. They had to get the proper certification. They were pretty picky about who was teaching, and they wanted to make sure that the Nantucket School of Needlery really was the best of the best.
Only board certified needlerists.
Needlerists?
Kind of, though, yeah. They had to pass the course, basically. And Mildred Davis, who I mentioned before, she really worked with Marianne Beinecke to create a business plan and proposal that established a really strong curriculum for the School of Needlery.
And this was a course that was taken on Nantucket?
By some. At first, it was exclusively in person. It was primarily targeted at year-round residents because the courses would be 6 weeks long or so and, you know, meeting weekly at night kind of thing, with the goal of training Nantucket women to become teachers.
So this class was intended to teach people the skills to also become a teacher in needlework. Interesting. Okay.
And yeah, another quote from the Inquirer and Mirror is, national surveys of the needlework field have consistently indicated the need for well-trained teachers in all types of embroidery. And it is hoped that this first group of teachers trained in Nantucket can provide the nucleus of a program that will work toward putting Nantucket in the foreground as America's needlework center. That was nice. Very in sync, you two.
Thank you.
So if you did this course on Nantucket, you got your needlery certification.
Yep.
Was that like a qualification that would be widely accepted regionally in the state, on the East Coast? Like, is that something where like you could go and say, I've completed my needlery certification. I am endowed with the power of the needle.
I mean, yeah, there aren't that many places in the 1960s offering certifications in needlework. The Nantucket School of Needlery, though, is by no means the only one. In the United States, there's also the American Institute of Textile Arts at Pine Manor College. And in the UK, there's the Royal School of Needlework that also offered certification. But yes, Nantucket School of Needlery really is one of those recognized certifications in needlework, and even more so later on into the mid-1970s as they start a correspondence course. The correspondence course you would sign up for, you could be anywhere in the country. I don't know if it was available internationally, but you would sign up, you would get a box in the mail, which you heard at the beginning of the episode, Susan Boardman talking about getting hers. And it comes with written paragraphs of instruction about how to do various stitches and photographs that demonstrate those stitches. And you'd take lessons through the mail, and every 5 lessons, they would be sent back to Nantucket, where one of these certified teachers would correct all your work and give you really pretty specific and in-depth feedback about what you were doing, and then send it back to you.
So it's remote learning.
Exactly.
It's like a very, very intense fiber art focused pen pal.
Yeah. And there were 3 levels of the course: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And to complete all 3, it would take about 2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of time to be learning needlery.
Each course got a little bit longer. So the beginner course is 5 sections long, then 10 sections, then 15 sections. And the advanced course also goes into more of the teaching needlework part as well. So even with this correspondence remote learning course, still that focus on being able to spread the knowledge, share the love. I also just want to add that even though the correspondence course was what made the Nantucket School of Needlery unique, that wasn't the only way that you could access it. They were still hosting courses on Nantucket, And actually, a lot of people would take the correspondence course and then come for a week-long, almost retreat dedicated to needlework. And Erica Wilson and Edie Bourrier would host people at their houses and teach needlework courses to these people visiting.
So if it's teaching people to be teachers, are they essentially getting like a teaching certificate?
Mm-hmm.
Does that have to be sponsored by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
It didn't have to be, but the Nantucket School of Needlery ultimately would become the only certificate in needlework certified by the Department of Education of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Is it the only one?
Yep.
Wow.
It was also likely the only one in the entire country. Not the only certification available, just the only one certified by
a government entity. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, do you know like a price point of how much it would cost to do this program?
It would be $75 for the first 5 sections. So for that beginner pack. And then for each section after that, it would be an additional $15.
It's interesting to think about the state providing like an actual certificate for learning this type of work, because I feel like it's almost like the equivalent of that today would be like if the NHA had permission from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to give out a degree for learning how to create light ship baskets or something like that, which I just can't imagine that happening nowadays. But
I think it speaks to the different priorities of whatever time you're looking at. And with that nationwide craft revival, really prioritizing different art forms, I think probably was more of a priority in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Something I loved about looking through the course, we have some of the course binders in our collection, and the intro packet really talks about needing the technical foundation for needlework and knowing the stitches and knowing the vocabulary, which I do not, full disclosure, but also knowing that once you have that foundation, in order to become an artist, you need to have your own ideas, your own techniques. And so sort of giving people a good foundation to work from, but encouraging them to find their own sparkle within needlework. I really liked that approach that they took. And the course also talks about, I think there was a newsletter that a lot of the people taking the course all had access to, and being able to submit their ideas. And there was a real collaborative approach as well of, if you see something that needs editing, let us know. This is not a static document kind of thing. And really wanting to cultivate community within needlework as well as knowledge, and wanting to connect people.
I like that.
It was nice to read that.
I mean, it's one of the best things about art is that it can bring you together, right?
Yeah.
As I'm thinking about needlework on Nantucket now, or even just textiles, I know that Nantucket Looms is still on Main Street. I can think of Erica Wilson on Main Street as well. The Nantucket School of Needlery, is that still around?
It's not. So for a while, it moved with Marianne Beinecke up to North Adams, Massachusetts. But the school ultimately closed, and then the commercial endeavor of Nantucket Needlery with the commissions and sales and things like that was taken over by Nantucket Looms. Now, I also want to point out that Nantucket Needlery and Nantucket School of Needlery were not the only needlework-focused commercial endeavors on the island.
I know Erica Wilson was also focused on education, right? Wasn't she on like public television showing people how to do needlework?
Yeah, she was on WGBH, I think. And
so Boston's public TV.
She was known as the Julia Childs of needlework. Huh. I haven't found any document talking about her or lecture or interview where people don't call her that. They all go, "Oh, Erica Wilson, the Julia Childs of needlework."
That's really funny.
Really funny to me.
Really funny. Yeah.
But it's interesting that they are all in, Nantucket
Yeah.
together.
She did collaborate with the School of Needlery. She taught classes there. She sold her work at Nantucket Needlery for some time, but ultimately always under her own separate brand name.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that Nantucket in the off season is a pretty small community, even today still. So I would imagine that all of these folks probably had a profound effect on each other. The school, Erica Wilson, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even though the Nantucket Needlery and the Nantucket School of Needlery no longer exist, Erica Wilson's store, Nantucket Looms, Elizabeth Gilbert's business, they all still operate in some iteration and are still very much so a part of Nantucket's current commercial landscape. And I think that sort of highlights the same community that you saw come together because of textiles with the Jared Coffin House restoration.
We'll be right back after this break with the Curator of Textiles at the Royal School of Needlework, Isabella Rosner, who is the host, writer, and producer for the So What podcast and a former NHA intern.
Welcome back to the Nantucket Gam. Today, Thomas and I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Isabella Rosner, Curator of Textiles and Contextual Studies Lecturer at the Royal School of Needlework, as well as the host, writer, and producer of the So What, that's S-E-W, So What podcast. Welcome, Isabella.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
We're excited too. So my first question for you is just how did you come to learn about the Nantucket School of Needlery?
So I was an intern at the NHA in 2014. I did not have basically any Nantucket knowledge. I saw the job posting on the University of Leicester job desk. Anybody who's in the world of like museums knows that that's the place to be for jobs. And I saw that they had a paid internship program and I said, let's go, let's apply. So I ended up as the 1800 house intern that summer in 2014. And I was tasked with creating quilting classes for the 1800 house. I am a passionate sewer and I wanted to create Nantucket themed quilting courses. And I was interested in kind of really emphasizing the Nantucket part of that. So I don't really remember exactly how I came across it, but I think it was like a few pages deep into Google when searching Nantucket textiles. And 2014 Google was a different beast. Was not finding a lot until I came across that name. I think that's how it went. And there was one little entry about it, and I was really interested in this because I had never heard of it before. I'm trying to remember if this is correct. At the same time, I had come across some information about a woman named Erica Wilson. I had never heard of this woman before in my life. I was like 19. And I found out that she had taught a lot of embroidery classes on the island and that she was a huge deal, that she was basically the Julia Child of needlework. She was trained at the Royal School of Needlework, all that good stuff. And all of a sudden, all these different pieces started coming together. And I was like, wait, this seems like a really big deal. And I was talking to Mary Emery, and she put me in touch with Susan Boardman, an artist on the island, and some other people who were involved in Nantucket, basically weaving traditions. And I just remember my tiny brain exploding. I remember kind of randomly happening upon and then finding out a lot about the Nantucket School of Needlery, deeply thrilling, not only because of my own interest in textiles, but also because it was my first chance of kind of rediscovering something that a lot of people already knew about, but I had never come across it before. So I was learning something new every day and making these wonderful connections and kind of I was putting together a puzzle that I didn't even know I wanted to put together, or a question that I didn't want answered at the beginning of that summer.
You also had the opportunity to speak with women like Suzanne Gardner and Edie Lynch, correct? What was that like?
Everybody was so generous with their knowledge and so happy to talk about their life on Nantucket and their life stitching and the legacy of that stitching. And it was really amazing to talk to people involved in a lot of different ways. So the person who really started me on my journey of even being interested in textiles was Edie Bourrier, who introduced me to Nantucket samplers at the beginning of that summer in June. And it was crazy to me that by August, I was talking to all of these seminal stitchers, these amazing members of the Nantucket School of Needlery, of people who knew and worked with Erica Wilson, who took needlework to other parts of America, who did all of this incredible stuff with Stitch. And the speed of everybody kind of banding together and being really willing to talk to me was mind-blowing, because I was only in Nantucket for like less than 3 months, but I started off my journey there only right at the beginning, understanding that I was really interested in textiles, and ending my journey having met all of these amazing people, especially these wonderful women.
It's really incredible. Did that really impact your career path after Nantucket?
100%. I am very much the person I am today and where I am today because of my time in Nantucket. When I interviewed for my job at the Royal School of Needlework, I said very boldly, very American of me in this really British institution, before they even got a chance to ask me questions, I said, can I just say, I have long loved this organization because of Erica Wilson. And they were like, wait, what? They were like, why is this American just like busting out this information? But my time in Nantucket was, I guess I could say, really important for two main reasons. One, because I learned what a sampler was, and it turns out that my entire existence is fueled by samplers. And then I think the other thing was learning about the Nantucket School of Needlery and learning about how much Nantucket was the epicenter of a mid-20th century needlework revival in the US, and how so much activity was happening in this tiny little place.
Can I ask for a bit more context? You talked about the mid-century revival and Erica Wilson. Can you explain how that fits into the conversation about the Nantucket School of Needlery?
Yeah, so the Nantucket School of Needlery was at pretty much the forefront of this large, I don't know, I am not really a scholar of 20th century needlework history, but if I remember correctly from my work back in 2014, a lot of the US got really interested in doing needlework. A lot of these women who were career women or women at home were really interested in kind of maintaining traditional needlework practices. And a lot of that happened because Erica Wilson was on TV teaching people how to do that. But before she was ever on TV, she was involved in all of this stitching that was happening in Nantucket, which was part of a larger kind of America-wide movement to get really interested in historical needlework techniques and to use old imagery and to experiment wildly with stitch on your clothing and for items for your home. Needlework materials were affordable, and needlework books were cheap as well. And people had time to make all of this stuff. And if I remember correctly, the Nantucket School of Needlery was the first, or possibly the only, I can't quite remember, distance learning program for embroidery in America, which unlocked something huge because it meant that not everybody can get to this tiny island 30 miles off the coast of Massachusetts, but no matter where you were in the country, you can kind of buy into a very thorough needlework education, and one that was really interested in using historically kind of informed techniques to create embroidery that was really relevant to mid-20th century life.
Something that really struck me in my research was that there was a survey done, a pretty extensive survey about American women and their interests. And there was really a focus on young women who had the time to do needlework. And I feel like you just sort of touched on that. It just really struck me that it wasn't for, grandmas who are sitting around at home all day. It's for any woman who has the time.
Yeah. And I think that's really relevant to today. I mean, it's relevant to my own work in that I think as somebody who's really invested in embroidery, I have to work very hard to fight against the narrative of needlework is just for your grandma, because needlework has always been relevant to all sorts of people, not just women, men and women, all genders, all ages, all circumstances. But I think you're so right when you point out the importance of needing to have time, because embroidery is a slow art form. It takes your time and your focus. I find it easier to knit in front of the TV than embroidering while in front of the TV, because I'm looking down at my work rather than at what's happening on the screen. But I think that the investment of time needed for embroidery is really relevant to the 21st century, because I think we're maybe all at a point where we're getting pretty sick of living all of our lives on our phones. And whether it's needlework or baking bread or anything else, I think we're all, whether we know it or not, really interested and kind of making moves towards fighting against the speed that life in this century expects of us. I think a lot of us are trying to be more mindful about the time we have and how we want to spend it, what we want to create with that, whether it's tangible or something, anything else. It doesn't have to be a physical object. But I think that embroidery in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where different types of people are going to the workplace and they have less time, or family structures are changing and people are thinking mindfully about how they spend their precious free hours. I think we're doing something similar today, where I'd like to think that we're reassessing how we spend our free time and what we want to do with those precious hours we have.
That's so interesting. I think also sort of brings in the appeal of the correspondence piece of the course for Nantucket School of Needlery. I think our touch point as young people learning about this today is remote learning through Zoom and being able to take courses from a distance. And so that's just sort of another way that this course and this school mirror our current reality in a way.
I think that's a really good point. And I think it raises a good point about the kind of social element of this sort of work. Embroidery and other forms of needlework or textile production can be very isolating on purpose if you want it to be, right? You can have your head down and you can have your headphones in or whatever, and it's just you and your stitching. Or it can be much more social. It has long historically been social. And I think that having a correspondence course, well, one was practical, right, to get people this knowledge off of the island and into the world, but also it created a connection of people who were working on similar work to you, who were interested in the same things. It was pardon the pun, the textile usage, but it was a thread, right, to draw you closer to people around the world and to techniques. So it was, I guess, that thread bound you to other people and also to other periods.
I love that. Do you have a sense of how that was different or similar to in-person courses with needlery?
I really have a lot of respect for people engaging in correspondence courses for something that is so visual that you had to rely on the images, like drawings of how your stitch moved in and out of fabric, or pictures that you were learning through still images rather than a moving one. How do you teach something that requires movement when you cannot mimic the movement? You have to break it down into component parts. Well, I'd be curious to know how it impacted how people were stitching, but I'd also be curious to know how it impacted those who were doing the stitching. I think you would have to think in a different way when you are forced to break down something that you can just show simply in front of somebody into words and a few images.
It's also fascinating that color work is such a huge part of any textile art, and the photos were in black and white. So not only are you not seeing the movement, but you're not really getting the same differentiation in color visually. It's very daunting to me to think about having to learn that way.
Definitely. And I remember being really interested. I think I must have seen like a photocopy of something. I can't even remember what it was, but I remember seeing like a really pretty grungy black and white image of, I think, a page from one of the correspondence courses. And I just remember thinking, I can barely see what I'm supposed to even be learning. And I think that, well, that's frustrating, but also kind of freeing. I think actually the correspondence course material is really interesting because it lays out for us, even not in words, but in images, what is expected, right? Like what is the rule and what is your own interpretation. And it reminds me a lot of how really intense educational needlework courses happen today, in terms of, like, especially at my own workplace, the difference between instruction and personal choice.
Thinking about the trends that you see in needlework more recently and courses taught today, do you think that there's any line traced back to Nantucket Needlery, and sort of what was the broader impact of this Nantucket school that went all over the country?
Ooh, two good questions. So I think that the Nantucket School of Needlery was a trailblazer in the US, but it wasn't the only organization doing kind of similar work. So I think the echoes of correspondence courses are alive and well today, especially when you're doing this sort of Zoom thing like you're talking about. Like, there are so many embroidery organizations around the world that offer Zoom classes. And for example, at the RSN, your work has to be assessed in person by RSN tutors. So you are doing your Zoom class, for example, you are doing your self-paced certificate or diploma course, and you are doing it from anywhere in the world. And you are getting your teaching online, but then you're sending your work to Hampton Court Palace, where it is being assessed by RSN stitchers. And that has, I think, such strong reflections of the Nantucket School of Needlery that the thread between the Nantucket School of Needlery and wherever that person is learning in the world can be very, very long, and they can never meet in person, but the needlework meets. And I think that's really interesting that in this sort of model, even though it's the human hand that makes the work, it's not the human that's involved in the experience so much by the end. It's the work speaks for itself, and the work is representing that maker when that finished piece gets to Nantucket or when it gets to the Royal School of Needlework or whatever. I think that the kind of correspondence course, even though we're no longer dealing with photocopied pages and big kind of almost binders of information, we're dealing with Zoom meetings. I think the way that things are assessed and the way that needlework knowledge is spread in that way is still pretty similar. Your second question, I need to now remember, like the impact of the Nantucket School of Needlery. I have a specific answer to this. It's my lived experience. So at the RSN, I run these kind of small tours because we have an annual little display in our exhibition space. And I would say every time, does anybody here know the name Erica Wilson? And every British person was like, no. Every American person who walked into that room said yes. And I was like kind of surprised. I was like, go America every time. But I didn't realize that there was such a divide, but I actually think that divide exists partially because America, partially thanks to the Nantucket School of Needlery, I think had a much richer domestic needlework production in the second half of the 20th century. So sorry to Britain for saying that. They obviously were doing lots as well, but because things were on TV, because there were correspondence courses, people were able to access needlework knowledge and education in a way that they weren't quite able to do as broadly in England. And I also think that Nantucket's kind of spread out into the world, especially like that move of Nantucket made goods and people like Erica Wilson to shop fronts in New York City also helped that spread.
It really struck me that when the Nantucket School of Needlery started, they brought teachers from all over, including several needlewomen who studied at the Royal School of Needlework. So it was really interesting to learn that Nantucket School of Needlery seems to have drawn from the pedagogy of your own institution in the UK.
Yeah, I think that the RSN pops up a lot in a kind of unexpected way. Like, I think in my own journey through embroidery history, I have been very surprised twice by the appearance of Nantucket in my journey. And one was when I realized Erica Wilson was taught at the RSN, because like I must have learned that in 2014, but I definitely did not remember. And it was like maybe at the end of my PhD, I was reading something and I found that out again. And I was like, that's crazy that it's all led to this. And then the other thing is I ended up studying Quaker needlework. I think that was probably a subconscious Nantucket for the hat, but I didn't realize it. But that was also a crazy realization where all of a sudden, like I was like 3 years into my thesis and I was like, oh, yes, I ended up studying this religious group that I had actually only learned about for the first time really while doing my internship at the NHA. So I think the RSN just happens to pop up quite a lot in Nantucket's story. It wasn't the only needlework organization that was teaching people in Britain at the time. There were lots and lots of them. But it, I think, largely comes down to the fact that Erica Wilson essentially won the bid. There was like a call out, right, for somebody to come teach embroidery. And I don't even know how she won the bid, but she basically won the bid fresh out of the RSN. And I think she brought with her then that sort of RSN network and interest in professional, like really thoroughly trained in a university program kind of thing, stitchers from other parts of the world like Sweden and further afield. So it's surprising connections in a beautiful, magical way, but in a way that is a little just unexpected, but also in a way that's very indicative of the smallness, the tininess of embroidery. The world of embroidery is very interwoven, not to use another textile term.
I was going to say close knit, but
close knit. We could just keep going. We could just keep going. I mean, textile terms are very relevant for a reason, but I think the world of embroidery, whether it's making or studying that thing, I see it even today, many years after the Nantucket School of Needlery. It is so about people making connections and being inspired by each other and learning stitches from each other and taking materials from each other. And that sort of network that made the Nantucket School of Needlery a reality is also what has informed basically the entire history of embroidery.
It's interesting that you're highlighting connection and exchange of ideas as one of the common threads when the Nantucket School of Needlery, by virtue of being on an island, is a fairly isolated organization, which makes me ask, why Nantucket?
A genuinely great question. And I have asked that many times before. If I remember correctly, because I interviewed Edie Bourrier for my podcast a few years ago, and I did ask her this question, I think. And I'm pretty sure the answer was basically like somebody had a house in Nantucket, maybe Mary Ann Beinecke, somebody had a house in Nantucket that she went to in the summers. And that person, whether it was Mary Ann Beinecke or somebody else, said, "Hey, Erica, you should come over. Check it out. Check out Nantucket. Teach us a few stitches." And she came and she was like, "This rocks. Love it." and I'm pretty sure that's essentially how it was born in Nantucket. Yeah. And, she ended up buying a house, opening her business here, like all of this stuff. But it seems like it possibly comes down to the magic of that place.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of humans are social creatures. And I think maybe when you are far away, you want to draw those connections. Even if you're having a nice time being isolated, you still want to be part of a community and you want to reach out.
Elizabeth Gilbert, who is another needlework artist, came to Nantucket just because she loved it so much. Her father had a summer house here, and so she ended up here sort of by coincidence. And then she had her own needlework store completely separate from the School of Needlery, but she came at the same time as Erica Wilson, and so was really part of that community as well. And in that way, it really is a little bit about the magic.
It really is. And I think that actually one of the things that was really striking to me when I was first every day learning something new about the Nantucket School of Needlery is the proportion of textile stuff to people on that island was crazy.
Yes.
That there was so much activity and such rich activity happening in such a small place. I think there's something in the water. I think there is some sort of magic to it that obviously interest breeds interest from other people. So there is a certain amount of somebody else is having, it's not just going to be one person having a good time. Loads of other people are going to want to get in and also enjoy this thing. Fair enough. But the fact that there were so many different bits of textile stuff happening at the same time from different people who were all kind of engaging with each other in different ways, but also doing their own thing. The number of people doing that compared to the number of people even on that island the percentage must be very, very high in comparison to other parts of the world.
It's really striking. And, Susan Boardman came to Nantucket for the first time to take a course at the School of Needlery. It became sort of a tourist attraction in its own way. bringing people to Nantucket, which is amazing.
Textile tourism is a real thing. And I think people outside of the world of textiles do not believe me when I say that people go feral. I use that word and I stand by that word because people will truly travel across the world to engage with textiles. And I think that speaks to the magic and the specialness of the art form, but also the fact that for many people who love textiles, it's a deep-seated love and passion. And there are many, many people out in the world who are interested in this thing, but it's not like you're always surrounded by those people. It's not like you're every day meeting another person who's really obsessed with textiles. So when you do meet other people who are really interested in this thing, you want to go. Yeah. You want to get in on that. You want to partake in that. You want to build that community because there's so much joy in stitching together, in being together, in looking at the stuff together and studying it together. Even in the most nondescript piece of embroidery or the piece of embroidery that you'll see time and time again forever, there's always a bit of the human in there, a bit of the maker. And if you look closely enough, you can get a little bit of their story. Their story might be a whisper, but if you lean in, you can hear it a little bit.
It has been such a delight chatting with you about needlework and Nantucket and all things textile-y. So thank you for joining us, and that's it.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. It's so exciting that Nantucket really was the beginning of my journey. And so to be here with you all, it means a lot. So thanks.
Thanks again.
Yay!
For more information, head to nha.org or check out the show notes. This episode was developed and created by Thomas Parrish, Adam DeLogue, and Annalie Gilbert Keith. Special thanks to our Chief Curator, Michael R. Harrison, and our Director of Collections and Research Services, Amelia Holmes. Our theme music was composed and performed by Isaiah Williams. Other music in this episode is by Blue Dot Sessions. The Nantucket Gam is a production of the Nantucket Historical Association. Thanks for listening.